The room held its breath. 300 witnesses would later swear they saw something that defied the laws of physics, something that contradicted everything they understood about human capability. According to those present, what transpired in those few seconds challenged not just athletic supremacy, but the fundamental nature of combat itself. The heavyweight champion had issued a challenge that seemed, by all conventional wisdom, impossible to refuse. 6 feet 3 inches of sculpted muscle, 210 pounds of athletic perfection, hands that moved faster than most cameras could capture. He had called out a man 75 pounds lighter, asking for something that should have been suicide. Let him hit me with his best shot. I will stand still, not block, not move. Let us see if Kung Fu is real or just dancing. The smaller man had accepted with conditions that witnesses later recalled as eerily specific. 1 strike only. He stands still. I strike once, then finished. February 9, Los Angeles. The downtown sports arena transformed into something between a laboratory and a coliseum. According to reported accounts, the arrangement had taken 3 weeks of negotiations. The champions' camp had insisted on documenting everything: multiple camera angles, medical personnel on standby, witnesses from both the boxing and martial arts communities. Muhammad Ali entered the makeshift ring in white shorts and red gloves, his movements carrying that distinctive rhythm that had revolutionized heavyweight boxing. At 30 years old, he remained undefeated. Since his return to the sport, his jab had been clocked at speeds that sports scientists struggled to measure accurately. Bruce Lee climbed through the ropes wearing only black pants, 5 feet 7 inches, 135 pounds, no gloves. Witnesses would later note the absence of warm-up, the lack of stretching, and the complete stillness that preceded movement. The juxtaposition struck everyone present. Ali's frame cast shadows that nearly swallowed his opponent. The reach difference measured over a foot. In any sanctioned bout, no athletic commission would have permitted such a mismatch. Yet according to those who witnessed the demonstration, something in Lee's bearing gave pause. He moved, or rather failed to move, with a quality that defied easy description. Where Ali's body maintained a constant rhythm even at rest, Lee achieved something approaching absolute stillness. The champion took his position at the center of the improvised ring, arms spread wide, the guard deliberately dropped. His smile, witnesses recalled, carried supreme confidence. This was theater. A teaching moment, a gentle correction of mythology. Hit me, your best shot, I will not block. Lee remained at the edge of the ring. 3 seconds passed, 5, 10. The crowd grew restless. Someone laughed nervously. The smaller man hadn't moved, hadn't shifted weight, hadn't even appeared to breathe deeply. Then, according to multiple accounts, something changed in his eyes. What followed existed in that peculiar space between witnessed fact and physical impossibility. Those present would spend decades attempting to describe it, never quite capturing what their eyes had registered, but their minds struggled to process. Lee took 1 step forward. Just one. The distance between the two men, 8 feet according to most estimates, ceased to exist. There was no acceleration phase that observers could identify, no telegraphing of intent, no gathering of momentum. One moment he stood at the ring's edge. The next, his hand connected with Ali's solar plexus. The sound, witnesses insisted, was wrong. Not the heavy thud of a boxing glove. Not the slap of bare knuckle on flesh. Something sharper, more precise, like bamboo breaking, one observer suggested. Like a whip crack, claimed another. Ali's reaction provided the only metric by which to judge what had occurred. According to the accounts of those present, the heavyweight champion's knees buckled instantly. Not the slow fold of a body blow absorbed and processed, but an immediate systemic failure. His diaphragm, medical professionals later explained, had gone into complete spasm. The champion sank to both knees, mouth open, unable to draw breath. His face, witnesses noted with universal agreement, showed not pain but incomprehension. This was not the familiar impact of a punch, not the crushing force he had absorbed from Sonny Liston or Joe Frazier. This was something categorically different. For 5 seconds that stretched like minutes, Ali remained on his knees, chest heaving in futile attempts to restore normal breathing. The arena had gone completely silent. Even the photographers had stopped shooting. Lee stood exactly where he had struck, hands still extended in the follow-through position. He hadn't stepped back, hadn't raised his hands in victory, hadn't acknowledged the crowd. According to several witnesses, he appeared to be waiting for something. When Ali's breathing finally returned, a gasping, desperate sound that echoed through the silent arena, he raised one gloved hand, not in surrender, observers noted, but in acknowledgement. Slowly, with the help of the ropes, the heavyweight champion returned to his feet. What followed surprised everyone present. Ali removed his gloves with deliberate care, walked to where Lee stood, and extended his hand. The handshake lasted longer than seemed necessary, accompanied by words that only those nearest could hear. "What did you do?" Ali asked. According to 3 witnesses who stood within earshot, Lee's response, reported with slight variations but consistent in essence. I showed you. Martial arts is not about power, about precision, understanding body, striking vulnerability, not strength. Ali, by multiple accounts, shook his head slowly. Then, in a gesture that his entourage would later describe as unprecedented, he raised Lee's hand above his head, not in the manner of a boxing victor, but as a teacher might present a master student. The crowd erupted then, 300 voices attempting to process what they had witnessed. Arguments broke out immediately. Skeptics insisted it had been choreographed, that Ali had simply played along with a predetermined outcome. Others swore they had seen something that challenged their understanding of combat sports entirely. The medical examination that followed, conducted by Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, according to available records, provided little clarity. Ali showed no bruising, no swelling, no visible trauma, yet he remained unable to engage in any sparring for 3 days, reporting a sensation he struggled to articulate, not pain exactly, but a systemic disruption that left him feeling disconnected from his own center. Lee, examined by the same physician, showed no signs of stress or strain. His pulse registered at 52 beats per minute. His hand exhibited no swelling despite delivering a strike that had dropped a man 75 pounds heavier. In the weeks that followed, the story spread through both boxing and martial arts communities like wildfire. Yet curiously, no major media outlet reported on the event. The film footage, which multiple witnesses swore had been captured from 3 angles, never surfaced. The still photographs that did emerge showed only the before and after. Ali standing with his guard down, Ali being helped to his feet, never the moment of impact itself. Ali himself, in public statements, dismissed the encounter as a friendly demonstration that had been exaggerated by fans of both sports. When pressed for details, he would smile and change the subject. Bruce Lee, he would say, according to numerous interviews, knew something we're still trying to figure out. Lee proved even more reticent. In the few interviews where the subject arose, he would deflect with technical explanations that satisfied no one. "Is not about strong or weak," one reporter quoted him as saying, "is about understanding, where to touch, when to touch, why touch." The debate raged for years within martial arts circles. Biomechanics experts attempted to reconstruct the strike based on witness accounts, producing theories ranging from the plausible to the fantastic. Some insisted Lee had targeted a specific nerve cluster that Western medicine didn't fully recognize. Others suggested a perfect convergence of timing, angle, and focused energy that transcended normal physical parameters. Traditional martial artists claimed vindication, proof that their ancient techniques could overcome modern athletic training. Boxers and wrestling advocates dismissed it as showmanship, insisting that no real combat application existed for such techniques. Yet among the 300 who had witnessed it, a different consensus emerged. Speaking years later, many would describe not the strike itself, but the silence that preceded it. The quality of Lee's stillness, the way time seemed to dilate in the space between his first step and the moment of impact. "I've watched every kind of combat sport," one witness, a boxing trainer with 40 years of experience, stated in a recorded interview. "I've seen knockouts that defied belief, but I've never seen anything like those 3 seconds. It wasn't just fast, it was inevitable, like he had already struck before he moved." Dr. Mendelsohn, breaking his professional silence 20 years after the event, offered perhaps the most intriguing perspective. In a medical journal article ostensibly about sports trauma, he included a single paragraph that many interpreted as referring to the Ali Lee encounter. "In rare instances, we observe physiological responses that challenge our understanding of impact dynamics. A precisely delivered strike to certain anatomical points can create systemic disruption far exceeding the kinetic energy involved." Ali would go on to fight for another decade, cementing his legacy as perhaps the greatest heavyweight in history. In his autobiography, he devoted exactly 1 paragraph to Bruce Lee, calling him the only man who ever made me understand that fighting was about more than fighting. Lee's death just over a year later ensured that many questions would never be answered. Those who had trained with him reported that he never spoke of the encounter except in the most general terms. His personal notes, examined after his passing, contained only a single reference, a diagram of the solar plexus with annotations in Chinese that translated roughly to gateway of breath, junction of power. The downtown sports arena was demolished in 19... By then, the story had passed into the realm of legend, told and retold with variations that grew more fantastic with each iteration. The original witnesses found themselves constantly correcting embellishments. No, Lee hadn't leaped through the air. No, Ali hadn't been knocked unconscious. No, there hadn't been any mystical energy displays. Yet even stripped of mythological additions, what remained defied easy categorization. A strike delivered across 8 feet of distance with no apparent acceleration. A heavyweight champion was dropped by a welterweight's single blow. A demonstration that had been filmed but never seen, witnessed by hundreds but never officially acknowledged. Some historians of combat sports have attempted to reconstruct the event through careful analysis of available evidence. They note the specific date, the roster of witnesses, and the medical records that seem to obliquely reference the encounter. Yet always, they stumble on the same fundamental question. If it happened as described, why does it contradict everything we understand about the physics of combat? Others suggest the contradiction itself holds the key, that Lee had discovered or rediscovered principles that modern sports science had overlooked in its focus on strength, speed, and endurance. They point to ancient texts describing masters who could disable opponents with touches that seemed to defy conventional physics, techniques dismissed by modern practitioners as mythology until that February afternoon forced a reconsideration. The philosophical implications haunted both communities for years. Western boxing had built its foundation on measurable metrics, pounds per square inch of force, foot-pounds of torque, the mathematics of momentum and leverage. Eastern martial arts spoke of chi, of meridians, of energy flows that Western science couldn't quantify. The Ali-Lee encounter suggested these weren't opposing worldviews, but incomplete halves of a larger truth. But perhaps the most telling detail comes from those who knew both men personally. They describe a mutual respect that emerged from that encounter, a recognition between two masters operating at the peak of their respective arts. Ali would occasionally be seen practicing movements that looked suspiciously like Wing Chun exercises. Lee began incorporating more lateral movement into his footwork, a fluidity reminiscent of Ali's revolutionary style. Their private conversations, according to those who witnessed them, took on an almost philosophical quality. Ali, who had previously dismissed martial arts as that karate stuff, began speaking about the psychology of combat in terms that sounded distinctly Eastern. Lee, for his part, developed a newfound appreciation for what he called the dance of distance that boxers had perfected. One particularly revealing incident occurred 6 months after the encounter. At a Hollywood party, according to 3 separate accounts, Ali was challenged by a drunk stuntman who mocked the February demonstration as staged. Ali's response surprised everyone present. Rather than engaging with his famous verbal jousting, he simply placed his hand on the man's shoulder in a gesture witnesses described as barely a touch. The stuntman's legs gave out immediately, his face registering the same incomprehension Ali himself had shown months earlier. "Bruce taught me that," Ali reportedly said to the stunned crowd. "Real power doesn't announce itself." The ripple effects extended far beyond the two men. Prominent boxing trainers began quietly studying martial arts principles. Angelo Dundee, Ali's legendary trainer, was spotted at Wing Chun schools taking notes. Freddie Roach, then a young fighter, would later credit witnessing the demonstration as fundamentally changing his approach to training. Conversely, martial arts schools across America experienced an influx of students seeking to learn the death touch, or the one-inch punch. Most were disappointed to discover years of foundational training preceded any advanced techniques. Lee himself, according to his students, seemed frustrated by the mythologizing of what he considered basic principles improperly understood. In his final interview, conducted just weeks before his death, Lee was asked directly about the encounter. The interviewer, frustrated by years of evasion, pressed for specifics. Lee's response, according to the transcript, was characteristically cryptic. "People think power comes from the muscle, from the size, from the speed. But real power comes from understanding. When you truly understand, one touch is enough." Muhammad understood this after. That's why he never asked for a second demonstration. The interviewer pressed further. Had it been real? Had he really dropped the heavyweight champion with a single strike? Lee's answer was his last recorded statement on the subject. What is real? If 300 people see something, if a man feels something, if understanding changes because of something, is this not real? Or is only real what the camera can capture, what science can measure? Maybe real is bigger than we think. His death in July 1973 added another layer of mystery to the encounter. The official cause, cerebral edema, satisfied few who knew him. Some suggested the intense focus required for such techniques took a toll on the body that Western medicine couldn't yet understand. Others whispered about ancient warnings against revealing certain knowledge to the uninitiated. Ali's reaction to Lee's death proved particularly poignant. At the funeral, witnesses reported the normally loquacious champion stood silent for nearly an hour beside the casket. When finally asked to speak, he said only, "He showed me something I'm still trying to understand. Now I'll never fully know." In the years that followed, Ali would occasionally demonstrate techniques that seemed to echo that February afternoon. During his fight with George Foreman in 1974, observers noted a moment in the 7th round where Ali, pressed against the ropes, placed his glove against Foreman's solar plexus in a motion that looked less like a punch than a push. Foreman's expression, caught in a famous photograph, showed the same bewilderment Ali had displayed 2 years earlier. Though Foreman recovered, he later admitted experiencing a momentary disconnection he couldn't explain. The medical community remained divided. Progressive researchers began investigating concepts like fascia manipulation and neurological override points. Conservative practitioners dismissed such theories as pseudoscience. Yet emergency room physicians began reporting unusual cases, patients brought in after altercations with martial arts practitioners showing systemic disruption without corresponding physical trauma. Dr. Mendelsohn continued his research privately, accumulating case studies that suggested the human body contained vulnerabilities that traditional Western anatomy had overlooked. His unpublished papers, discovered after he died in 1994, included detailed diagrams of what he called disruption points, locations where minimal force could create maximum systemic effect. Today, the encounter exists in that twilight space between history and mythology. Sports historians acknowledge that something occurred in Los Angeles in February 1972, something that brought together two of the most iconic martial artists of the 20th century. The exact nature of what transpired remains a subject of endless debate. Modern mixed martial arts, with its synthesis of Eastern and Western techniques, owes a debt to that afternoon. Whether acknowledged or not, fighters now speak casually of concepts that would have seemed mystical 50 years ago: pressure point strikes, chi disruption, neurological overrides, terminology that straddles the line between science and art. Yet perhaps the debate itself misses the point. In an era where combat sports had become increasingly codified, regulated, and scientifically analyzed, the Ali Lee encounter suggested something else entirely. It hinted at possibilities beyond weight classes and rule sets, beyond the careful matching of size and reach and power. The encounter challenged not just sporting conventions but fundamental assumptions about human capability. If a man 75 pounds lighter could drop a heavyweight champion with a single strike, what other impossibilities might be possible? If understanding could triumph over physical advantage, what did that mean for how we conceived of conflict itself? These questions resonated far beyond martial arts circles. Military combatives programs began incorporating principles that seemed to echo Lee's approach. Law enforcement agencies started exploring soft techniques that could incapacitate without permanent damage. Even corporate training programs began using the encounter as a metaphor for how knowledge and precision could overcome brute force in business. Most tellingly, among those who were present, the 300 who shared that silence in the downtown sports arena, there is remarkable consistency in one aspect of their testimony. They all described the same moment of recognition, the same collective intake of breath, the same understanding that they had witnessed something that existed outside their normal framework of reference. Years later, many would struggle to articulate exactly what they had seen. The language failed them. They would gesture helplessly, trying to convey something that existed between thought and action, between intention and result. Several described experiencing a shift in their own perception, as if witnessing the strike had altered something fundamental in how they understood movement itself. A champion who thought speed was everything until he encountered someone who didn't need to move. A master who proved that understanding could overcome any physical advantage. A moment that lasted 3 seconds and left questions that persist 50 years later. The arena is gone. Most of the witnesses have passed. The footage, if it ever existed, remains hidden in some vault or destroyed by time. Yet the story endures, passed from teacher to student, from one generation of martial artists to the next, not as fact necessarily, but as a possibility. A reminder that what we think we know about combat, about physics, about human capability, might be smaller than what remains to be discovered. The mythology that has grown around the encounter serves its own purpose. Each retelling adds layers, embellishments, impossibilities. Yet at its core remains that kernel of witnessed truth. Something happened that shouldn't have been possible, and in that impossibility lies a challenge to every assumption we hold about human limits. Perhaps that's why the story refuses to die. In an age of video analysis and biomechanical modeling, of perfectly understood techniques and scientifically optimized training, the Ali Lee encounter stands as a reminder that mystery still exists, that there are aspects of human capability we haven't yet mapped, territories of possibility we haven't yet explored. In the end, those who were there don't argue about what happened. They simply remember the silence before Lee moved, the sound that wasn't quite a sound when his hand found its target, and the look on Ali's face as he tried to understand what his body had just experienced. They remember the quality of the afternoon light streaming through the high windows of the arena. They remember the way dust motes seemed to hang suspended in the moments before impact. They remember the collective gasp that followed, not of surprise but of recognition, as if everyone present had witnessed not just a physical event, but a fundamental truth momentarily revealed. They remember, and in remembering, they preserve something more valuable than proof: the knowledge that on one February afternoon in Los Angeles, the impossible became inevitable, if only for 3 seconds. The rest, as they say in both boxing and martial arts circles, is commentary. Some things, after all, can only be understood by those who felt them, even if history chooses to forget.